Hi, my name is Karen Fabian and I am the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and I'm here today to do a quick video, a practice video, focused on yoga for athletes. And I kind of hesitate to use that phrase, while I do think it's something that is helpful to do to kind of clarify the focus of the practice. I will say that because of the nature of what we're going to do today, it's really applicable to anybody, especially those who sit a lot during the day, because some of the things that occur in athletes like runners and cyclists occur also in people who sit a lot during the day, and we'll get into some of that with respect to hip flexors. So while I am going to talk specifically to some syndromes or some things that happen when we're doing a lot of running or doing a lot of cycling, you may find that these things are applicable to you as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the practice, and as I'm going through, I'll talk to you about some of the applicable anatomy so that maybe you'll pick up a couple of new thoughts and concepts here. And it'll give you a chance to do some physical practice. I might break every once in a while to refer to the skeleton. We'll just kind of see how it goes. I don't always script these things out before I do them, so we'll see kind of as things come up where it's helpful to possibly refer to Skeletor here. Looks like his leg is a little bit out of joint. Okay, all right, so let's begin. I'm actually going to have you begin on the back. And the reason for this is because I want it to be really accessible to you and give you a chance to open through the shoulders. So by that I mean you're not going to turn your palms down, you'll turn them up and set your feet flat on the mat, and just take a couple breaths here just to get grounded and to let yourself relax for a moment. All right, and then from here, begin to press down, and coming into bridge pose, lift your hips. So this can be a really good movement for athletes who are constantly moving through hip flexion and extension. So of course we're talking runners and cyclists who tend to have a lot of active contraction of the hip flexors, primarily the psoas. One of the quadriceps, which starts at the hip and ends at the knee, is the rectus femoris. So this gives those muscles a chance to lengthen and then lower down. For folks that sit a lot during the day, we'll do another one here, their challenge is that the muscles in the back of the legs, primarily the glute max and the hamstrings, are passively used there. And so coming into bridge pose can be a great way to start to strengthen them. So even though here the knees are bent and we're using our hamstrings, so here we are contracting the hamstrings, when we're sitting a lot during the day, the hips are in flexion, as you see here. So the glute max is passively lengthened. So now coming into one last bridge, we're using bridge pose to contract the glutes, which is good for folks who are kind of sitting a lot. And then the hip extension is good for, I guess you'd say, athletes. All right, so now from here, hug your knees into your chest. And then come on up to seated and come over onto your hands and your knees. All right, so here we're going to keep the gaze down at the thumbs and take a couple of movements just by rounding the back and dropping the belly down. And I'm not going to have you lift your chin at all and look forward, which is a somewhat typical cat-cow movement. I'm just focusing here on your serratus anterior, which is the muscle that draws the shoulder blades away from the center of the back, away from the spine, and is really helpful in different poses like plank and low push-up. So we'll do a couple of these to get that muscle warmed up. And then from here, we'll move into downward facing dog. So bringing the hands forward a bit, tucking the toes, lifting up through the hips. All right, so now move around a little bit by walking your dog out, bending back and forth through the knees. And then as you slow down the movement and look to find the right spot for your hands, really get that action of pushing off the ground versus sinking into the ground. And that might require adjusting inward a bit. And then notice as you push off the ground more, especially again for runners and cyclists, the hamstrings may be a little hypersensitive, a little shortened, so bending the knees may help. Take a couple breaths. And then from here, step your right foot forward, stack your knee over your heel, and drop your back knee to the mat. So this is just going to be a preliminary hip flexor stretch. Right, again, working that same length that we did when we were on the floor in bridge, bringing the hips slightly forward. And then we'll add the arms to the sky to get a little length through the side body. And then release down, and we'll progress to the other side. So notice here, I'm not really moving too far forward. So I'm not really leaning too much. Just trying to get a little bit of length here without too much push forward. Take the arms up, and then bring them down. Okay, and then from here, bring the right foot forward. And keep the back heel lifted. We'll basically do the same thing. We'll come up and then reach the arms to the sky. So here, sometimes common action is to blow out through the chest. So I'm just going to ask you to, if that's happening, pull in slightly through your core, engaging your rectus abdominis. And then another thing here is maybe bend the back knee slightly if you feel like you're leaning forward a bit, which can happen when the hip flexors are tight on the straight leg side. And then we'll come down, we'll step back, and we'll do it on the other side. Left foot forward, come on up. So if the hip flexor that we're lengthening, which is this one here on this side, is a little shortened, I might be pitched forward. So that bending the back knee may give me a little bit of slack there so I can upright my body and come up straight. All right, and then I'll come down and step back. All right, so now walking the feet forward, come up all the way, and we'll do two just kind of traditional sun salutations. So coming into chair, bring the hands to the heart, fold, and then step into plank pose. So this is where we use the serratus again. Right, we're not really rounding the back like we were before, but we're keeping some pressure into the mat, into the floor. Come forward and lower, and then take an upward dog. It's another really nice hip flexor stretch. Here we're stretching both sides at the same time. And then down dog. All right, now stepping the right foot forward, come on up, and here's our warrior one. Because the back heel is down, if that is too much on that hip flexor and you're pitched forward, you can repeat crescent lunge, right, by lifting the back heel. Otherwise, both feet down. And then release down to the mat. You could lower all the way down or halfway. Coming up, and then pressing back. Do the other side, bring the left foot forward, come on up, warrior one. And then come on down, lower down, and then up and back. So we'll do one more here. So go ahead and walk your feet forward. Come up to standing. Come back into chair and bow. Lift halfway, step to plank. Move through your low push-up, or you could skip it if you want. Downward facing dog. All right, right foot forward, warrior one or crescent lunge, and then release. Inhale on your way up. Exhale, press back, and then left foot comes forward. Inhale, reach. And then exhale down. upward facing dog, and then back to down dog. All right, so here, let's do this. Let's bring the knees down to the mat and sit back on the heels. Okay, so you may get a lot of feedback here. The plantar fascia, which is that really thick band of tissue from the base of your toes to your heel, can get pretty tight, especially in athletes, but even in anyone that walks around in shoes that maybe aren't great for them support-wise. All right, so just a couple breaths here. All right, and then from here, we're going to come into camel pose. Sometimes it's nice to pad the knees. And the reason I'm putting camel pose in here is because I want to get something that's going to extend my hips again. At the same time, both sides, bilateral hip extension. I can tuck the toes to lift the back end up a little bit rather than untucking. Bring the hands back to the heels, press the hips forward. All right, I don't really need to involve my neck so much. I want to kind of protect my neck from too much extension. So just setting the gaze forward and thinking here of pressing the hips forward. This is really similar to bridge we did at the beginning, laying on the back. Lift up through the heart, and then using your legs, strength, come up, and then just back down. All right, so just a couple more movements here. We're going to focus for a moment now on moving into the side plane. All right, so let's do it first with the right foot forward, coming into warrior two. So this is good for athletes because both runners and cyclists work a lot in this front to back plane, right? But not a lot on the side. So here as we come into warrior two, we're taking it out wide. And then if we add reverse warrior and side angle, we get more in that side to side plane. All right, and then from there coming down, high to low, push down as you lower, upward facing, and then down dog. So coming into warrior two on the left side, right, I'm keeping my knee over my heel as I turn my upper body, keeping that front knee straight ahead rather than letting it travel with me. This is again important for athletes because we want, kind of the wear and tear on the body, which is bound to happen evenly. So if we move a little this way, right, there's an unevenness there in terms of the knee capsule, the ligaments on the medial and lateral side of the knee. So we want to keep straight ahead, reverse, and then come into side angle. I could even do side angle here with a block. So if I wanted to take a block and put it to the outer shin, that gives me a little more support as I'm in the pose. Right, so I'm just adding some things in to work the side plane here. And then back. All right, and then from here, I'll have you come back to where you started on the back. All right, so let's come up into bridge. Take a little bit of a different position. We'll take interlacing the hands underneath. Now if this is difficult to get that external rotation, I can grab a strap and put that between the hands. So this starts to open up through pec major and pec minor, which can get really tight in cyclists as they hunch over the bike, or even runners if you notice you internally rotate the shoulders or hunch in as you run. That can be a nice way to open. And then we'll do another variation, take the arms back. So now we're looking at lengthening through the latissimus dorsi, the lats, right? When we're hunched down, we're contracting that muscle. So here we're lengthening as we come into the pose, come on down. And then bring the hands to the heart, hug the knees in, rock a little bit side to side, and then come on up. Okay, so just a couple things here from the perspective of anatomy. We're talking about hip flexors a lot in this brief practice. So think about the psoas is one of the powerful hip flexors. It's deep inside the core. It's on the lumbar spine and runs down to the femur. So it's primarily responsible for hip flexion. I also mentioned before one of the heads of the quadricep muscle begins on the pelvis itself and ends on the knee along with the other three heads, but they begin actually on the femur itself. So that's another hip flexor. There's a couple other hip flexors. There's the gracilis muscle, which also is pelvis to knee. But when we primarily talk about hip flexors, most oftentimes we're referring to psoas and rectus femoris. Pec major and pec minor, of course, in the chest. These are internal rotators, so poses like up dog stretches them out. Or again, interlacing the hands behind the back would stretch those two muscles, which can be really good for athletes to do to counteract, over the bike where they're contracting, or even runners if you find that you hunch. And again, people that just sit at a desk all day, that's a familiar shape as well. So if you're looking for more details about anatomy, if you go to my website, barebonesyoga.com, there's a download right on the home page about hips, shoulders, and back bends, which are all great areas of the body to focus on whether you're an athlete or kind of a professional sitter. And there's also, if you're a yoga teacher watching this and you want some help putting together sequences, on my homepage is a free download, which is how to build yoga sequences, and it'll walk you through a template putting those pieces together. So the website is barebonesyoga.com. I invite you to go there and take the free downloads. That's why I put them there. And if you have any questions, please send me an email, Karen@barebonesyoga.com. Thanks so much for watching. Please feel free to add your comments, and namaste.